Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we are diving into the major breaking stories shaping the world as of September 29, 2025. The headlines are intense, dramatic, and carry global consequences. One of the most striking developments is yet another humiliation faced by Russian President Vladimir Putin on both the military and diplomatic fronts. The ongoing war in Ukraine continues to erode Russia's strength and international reputation, and the failures are piling up in ways that are impossible for the Kremlin to ignore. Russia's attempts to showcase power have been met with setbacks, and each setback has only further exposed the cracks within the Russian leadership and its ability to project dominance on the global stage. In Ukraine, the latest battlefield reports point to significant advances by Ukrainian forces, who are not only holding ground, but also pushing deeper into areas Russia once claimed as secured. What is remarkable is the way Ukraine's Western-backed strategy has combined advanced weaponry with highly coordinated maneuvers. This has created enormous pressure on Russian troops, who are increasingly being forced into defensive position. Satellite images confirm heavy losses of equipment, particularly tanks and artillery that Russia had deployed as part of its supposed counteroffensives. This continuing attrition makes it clear that Moscow's military machine is bleeding resources at an unsustainable rate. The humiliation for Putin is not confined to the battlefield. Diplomatically, Russia is facing isolation on nearly every international platform. New sanctions, particularly targeting the energy and technology sectors, have tightened the noose around the Russian economy. Countries that once remained neutral are now openly criticizing Moscow. Even within alliances that Russia once counted as friends, there are signs of distance. China, while still officially aligned, has taken steps to limit exposure to secondary sanctions, leaving Russia to struggle more heavily with financial and trade bottlenecks. This growing isolation adds to Putin's image of weakness and fuels internal criticism back home. Inside Russia, cracks in the carefully maintained narrative are starting to show. Independent reports suggest growing dissent within elite circles and among ordinary Russians who are bearing the brunt of inflation, shortages, and restricted freedom. Many families now have first-hand experience of loss, with tens of thousands of soldiers killed or wounded. While public protest is risky and often met with harsh repression, the whispers of discontent are spreading in ways the Kremlin cannot fully suppress. This internal dissatisfaction poses one of the greatest threats to Putin's hold on power, as a population that has grown weary of war could ultimately challenge his authority more than external enemies ever could. Alongside the Russia-Ukraine developments, another breaking story that demands attention involves NATO's evolving posture in Eastern Europe. The alliance has doubled down on its commitment to defending every inch of its territory, sending a direct warning to Moscow. The United States and several European allies have announced new deployments of advanced air defense systems and additional troops to countries bordering Russia. This escalation sends a clear message that NATO will not tolerate spillovers from the conflict, and that the cost of aggression will only continue to rise for Russia. The presence of NATO's forces so close to Russian borders represents yet another point of humiliation for Putin, who initially launched this war to push NATO back, but has instead achieved the opposite. At the same time, Ukraine's resilience and determination are being celebrated worldwide. The Ukrainian president has addressed international audiences, emphasizing the importance of continued support and solidarity. The message is that Ukraine's fight is not only for its own survival, but for the principles of sovereignty and democracy that are under threat globally. This framing has resonated with many nations and has made it increasingly difficult for any government to justify neutrality or silence in the face of Russia's aggression. The result has been a steady increase in international aid, both military and humanitarian, giving Ukraine more tools to withstand the Russian onslaught. Meanwhile, energy markets are experiencing renewed volatility. Europe's push to eliminate reliance on Russian oil and gas has largely succeeded, but the global market still reacts to Russia's shrinking role as a supplier. Prices have fluctuated in recent weeks, adding pressure on countries heavily dependent on imports. However, alternative sources such as renewables, liquefied natural gas, and expanded partnerships with Middle Eastern and African producers are beginning to stabilize the outlook. For Russia, this energy shift represents another humiliation, as one of its biggest tools of leverage has been stripped away. Without its dominance in energy markets, Moscow loses both revenue and influence, further shrinking its global relevance. Another top story on September 29 is the ongoing tension in the South China Sea. While not directly related to Russia, these developments show how the global balance of power is shifting. The United States has conducted new freedom of navigation operations, drawing sharp criticism from Beijing. At the same time, regional powers like the Philippines and Vietnam are becoming more assertive in defending their claims, emboldened by stronger ties with Washington. This contest in the South China Sea underscores how multiple flashpoints are testing the international system simultaneously, leaving powers like Russia further marginalized as attention shifts to other pressing conflicts. Domestically, in the United States, political debates continue to revolve around foreign policy, defense spending, and the role of America in global security. With the presidential election cycle looming, candidates from both major parties are weighing in on how best to handle the Russia-Ukraine war, U.S.-China relations, and broader global instability. This debate reflects not only America's internal divisions, but also the reality that U.S. decisions carry outsized influence on the outcomes of these conflicts. The outcome of this debate will shape the next stage of international relations, with significant consequences for allies and adversaries alike. Turning back to Russia, another key humiliation comes in the form of lost technological capabilities. Western sanctions and export controls have cut Russia off from critical semiconductors and advanced components needed for both civilian and military industries. Factories that once produced equipment at scale are now struggling to maintain even basic production levels. The military is increasingly forced to rely on outdated systems, scavenged parts, or imports from countries with less advanced technologies. Reports indicate that drones, missiles, and even vehicles being deployed to the battlefield are of lower quality than before, undermining their effectiveness and morale among soldiers who are expected to fight with them. What makes this moment so dramatic is that Russia, once feared as a global superpower, now faces limitations that expose it as far weaker than previously imagined. The illusions of invincibility are being shattered daily, and Putin's personal image as a strongman is deteriorating. Each new humiliation not only affects Russia's external standing, but also erodes the aura of control that Putin has carefully cultivated for decades. His authority depends heavily on projecting strength, but when reality consistently demonstrates weakness, maintaining that narrative becomes nearly impossible. The latest battlefield maps suggest that Ukraine may soon reclaim additional territories that Russia has held since the early stages of the war. While progress is difficult and costly, the symbolism of regaining land that Russia had declared annexed would deal yet another blow to the Kremlin's credibility. If these advances continue, they could reshape the war's trajectory and further cement Ukraine's role as a resilient nation fighting against overwhelming odds. Such developments are likely to be celebrated not only within Ukraine, but also by its allies, reinforcing the sense that Russia is steadily losing ground both literally and figuratively. Another element worth highlighting is the role of information warfare. Both sides continue to fight for control of the narrative, but Russia has struggled to maintain its propaganda dominance. International media, independent investigations, and the digital landscape have revealed many of the Kremlin's distortions. The result is that Russia's justifications for the war are increasingly seen as hollow, and the international community has grown more skeptical of any claims coming from Moscow. This erosion of credibility adds another layer to Putin's humiliation, as his ability to manipulate global opinion diminishes with each passing month. At the same time, Ukraine's messaging has been clear, consistent, and effective. By portraying itself as a small nation resisting an aggressive giant, Ukraine has successfully framed the conflict in moral terms that resonate worldwide. This narrative has not only brought in material support, but also created a sense of shared purpose among democracies. The stark contrast between Ukraine's story of resilience and Russia's story of aggression highlights the deep divide between the two sides and underscores why international sympathy overwhelmingly favors Ukraine. Looking forward, the question becomes how long Russia can sustain its current trajectory. With mounting losses, economic decline, and political strain, the situation is unsustainable in the long run. Putin may attempt to double down with harsher tactics or seek new alliances, but the options are limited and risky. Any miscalculation could accelerate the unraveling of his regime. Analysts are already discussing scenarios in which internal pressures lead to fractures within the Russian state, potentially paving the way for dramatic shifts in leadership or policy. Whether these scenarios play out remains uncertain, but the trend lines are increasingly unfavorable for the Kremlin. In conclusion, September 29, 2025, marks another day of global headlines that reveal the shifting dynamics of power and the challenges facing leaders worldwide. For Putin, it is yet another chapter of humiliation, with battlefield failures, diplomatic isolation, economic decline, and internal dissent all converging to undermine his grip on power. For Ukraine, it is a moment of resilience and opportunity, supported by international solidarity and strengthened by effective strategy. For the rest of the world, these events serve as reminders of how interconnected our future is and how the choices made in one region can reverberate globally. This unfolding story is far from over, but what is clear is that the world is watching, and history is being written in real time. As each day passes, the balance shifts further away from Russia's favor and closer to a new chapter in global politics. The lessons from this moment will shape the next era, and the consequences of these humiliations for Putin will continue to echo for years to come.